Good evening, Holliston. Welcome to the Select Board's meeting for Monday, May 24th, 2021. Our agenda tonight will start with the coronavirus community update with Chief Cassidy. Before we get going, just want to let folks know Ms. Hine will not be joining us this evening. Ben and I will handle the events of the evening. Chief, come join us. How are you?
I'm exceptional, thank you.
That's great.
Things continue to trend in the correct direction.
We have some news to share, don't we?
Oh, we've got some great news, yes. So we've only had 2 cases since I was with the board last Monday. We've had 12 additional recoveries. No new fatalities reported to us. We currently have only 4 active cases, and those date from May 1st, May 10th, May 19th, and May 24th. So half of the active cases are older than 2 weeks. So looking at the graph, we're starting to plateau off, which is what we want to see. But the really good news is on the next slide, which shows that as of last Thursday, we are in the gray. And that is the first time since mid-September that our risk designation, as determined by the Department of Public Health, is in the gray. And after 16 consecutive weeks in the yellow, we were very glad to see that change. So
That's quite a drop.
it is, yes, and especially when you also consider concurrent with that was the number of tests being done also significantly dropping. So, because we know that that impacts positivity, so that's...
So we're now falling more in line with the state.
Yes, we are right on with the state. When you look at the entire Commonwealth, obviously there are just a few red communities left, but fortunately we are nowhere near that in our statistics. Moving on to vaccination information, we are very pleased to report that we have 57.6% of our community who are reported to be fully vaccinated based on the report that came out last Thursday, and that is for data that was entered into the state system through last Tuesday. We have almost 3/4 of our community is at least partially vaccinated, including very high numbers for our 65 and older, high numbers approaching for our 30 to 49 and our 50 to 64. But what I'm really excited about is that as of last Thursday's report, 23% of the 12 to 15-year-olds and 97% of the 16 to 19-year-olds had already received at least 1 shot.
That's great.
So that is really, really good news.
Statistically, is that 73.6, is that a herd immunity number? I mean, I know we're speaking nationally, but locally, that number is important, right? 70%?
Yeah, 70 to 80 is normally what wants to look at from an immunological standpoint. From a environmental standpoint, it still would need to be more likely people that had contracted the disease and had natural antibodies. But from a manufactured herd immunity, 70 to 80 is a good number. Yes, absolutely.
I think the little tricky part there, though, is that because other communities affect that too. It's not like we're a bubble, so
yes.
we have to.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, I mean, we're not a destination in terms of like
True.
a lot of people.
But a lot of people are going elsewhere.
Yes.
And working.
Does
on
our
places.
color designation have anything to do with vaccination?
Not at all. No, when they changed the metrics for vaccination, or for risk designation back in November, they still didn't have anything coming to market yet. So it's completely based on number of cases, positivity rate.
So when you're looking at the statewide map that Chris just had up that showed the color designations, if any of those communities happen to be reaching the same kind of vaccination levels that we are, we wouldn't know that.
Correct.
Unless you drill into some DPH.
Yeah, I mean, you'd need to spend some time with their data, but it's publicly available. But no, those red communities are really just related to cases, high case counts. Okay, so speaking of vaccination, the pre-registration system that the Commonwealth has had in place for several months is closing at the end of May, and they are also expanding the homebound vaccination program. I know that the Board of Health and the Senior Center were able to make sure that we had a few folks in our community who were unable to get to a local vaccination site, have a vaccinator from the Commonwealth come to their home and vaccinate them. So because the vaccine is so readily available, there's not really a need for folks to pre-register anymore. Most people are able to get appointments very quickly, so they're phasing out the pre-registration system at the end of this month, which is only next week. But they are continuing to expand access for homebound individuals, which We had previously identified most people that were in that category. Again, senior center has a really good handle on that population, and they knew of people and made sure that if they couldn't get them a ride to a site, that they got them into the state vaccination program. Do want to talk quickly, once again, as mentioned last week, the state mask mandate ends on May 29th. But I am going to implore the community, don't start burning your masks just yet, because there are some locations where you will certainly be required to have them. They are required on public and private transportation systems, which include the van from the senior center. It also includes the transportation that's offered by our school district. They are required in healthcare facilities and other settings hosting vulnerable populations, such as our nursing home. And a reminder that under DESE guidelines, they will still also be required indoors for staff and students of K-12 schools and early education providers. Students, as of last week, are now able to do recess outdoors without having to wear masks, but teachers are still wearing them indoors, as are the students. In terms of mask orders locally, the Board of Health last Tuesday evening rescinded their mask order that had been in place since April 29th, 2020. And last Thursday evening, the school committee rescinded their mask order and defaulted to the state regulations, so DESE guidelines, EEA guidelines, which were then adopted by MIAA. So everybody's now in line with just whatever the state says. That's what we're doing. We don't have any local situation that would warrant us having more stringent regulations. And again, in addition to what's listed as being mandatory, an individual business can request that individuals entering their establishment continue to wear masks. And again, the CDC guideline is that they recommend the use of masks by unvaccinated individuals indoors who cannot, who are not just with their household group, but there's no requirement, and no one is asking to see anyone's proof of vaccination. And with that,
Mike, does that mask order from the Board of Health effectively mean that public buildings other than schools will no longer require masks here at Town Hall, library, police department, Council on Aging, and so forth?
as of May 29th.
As of May 29th?
Yes, that is correct. And I'm not sure if Mr. Ahern's going to address it during his update, or if you wanted me to talk about sort of where we are with reopening municipal buildings. You want to do that now, or you want to do that later?
Yeah, why don't you touch on it now?
So we've had several municipal buildings that have still remained not fully open to the public or still closed completely to the public. With the lifting of the mask order and lifting the sector-specific restrictions and capacity limits, it is our expectation that all municipal buildings will be 100% reopened to the public as of Tuesday, June 1st, which is the first business day after May 29th. The one exception to that would likely be the Council on Aging. They're still waiting for a flooring vendor to come in, and that's imminent.
Yeah, I heard that. They're underway, actually, I heard.
Excellent, yeah, because
Yeah.
they were just concerned that they would reopen on June 1st, have to close the week of June 7th, and then reopen again the following week. So if they can get everything done in the near future, they can open sooner, but they may be the other ones that are not fully open as of June 1st.
But not for public health reasons, but for
Correct, just because
renovation.
please pardon our appearance while we renovate. Yes, absolutely. So, you know, folks like here on the first floor of Town Hall who are still by appointment only, those restrictions in terms of access for the public would be open on June 1st, and anyone would be able to come in off the street without an appointment.
One other thing, and this is probably for the new board to consider once they reform, we're planning a new septic system, correct? Is that a summertime job?
It is. We discussed with everybody involved, the facilities manager will be overseeing the procurement there, and it's probably on an August timeline. We've had interest in the upper town hall.
That's where it's going, yeah.
Yeah, and so there's going to be a fine line. Obviously, we want people to enjoy the space and use the beautiful new floors. so long as they don't scratch them. But at the same point, we are not open for business of the Upper Town floor, not Upper Town Hall, not because of COVID, but because of limitations of the facility.
So once that septic is put in place, we're beyond the public health order. I think the new board should consider new fees and cost structures associated with renting the hall. So.
And there would be no capacity restrictions that would impede its use by an outside group.
More than that in FY22.
Absolutely. That's it for the first half.
All right, let me just see if there are any questions from any folks on our Zoom call relative to the coronavirus community update. Of course, I can't see who's on the call.
Nothing.
No questions? All right. We'll move on to, excuse me, to the CARES Act. Are you all set, Ben?
No, I'm fine. I'm good.
Nothing from Tina. We'll move on to the CARES Act, ARPA programmatic update.
Excellent. So in terms of our CARES expenses, I believe you've been sent an update with those expenses that have been posted to Munis through yesterday. There were 5 additional expenses posted since last week, which included hiring and training, cleaning and disinfecting of public buildings, and grocery and meals delivery. And so that's the line version, and then we've got the graphical version, which brings us right up to ARPA. So, as per...
Can you go back real quick, Mike?
Yes, of course.
Just very quickly, I'm sorry
Sure.
to... this picture has been relatively static as we end fiscal year 21.
Yes.
Do we envision any FY22 expenses starting in July relative to CARES that might be in play? And I'm talking big picture items, because many of those items, I believe, were funded through June 30th.
Yes, and a lot were front-loaded early in the public health emergency. Things like rent, mortgage relief, we did 3 phases of that.
Cleaning.
Cleaning, and cleaning is something that I've been in conversation with the facilities manager to talk about when we modify our cleaning procedures, because as of May 29th, when all of the industry-specific standards go away, there's no more high-touch, high-traffic cleaning requirements. There's specific instructions for if you have an exposure, but beyond that, it's just normal routine cleaning. So this is going to be something that we're going to have to determine whether we're just going to go straight back to our twice-a-week cleaning of certain municipal buildings, or whether we're going to continue to do some of those high-touch, high-traffic for a month. We have to see what the service level agreement with the vendor was. I know they were put on notice early on that it was as long as the need arises or continues to exist and there's still funding, but at the same time they've been good to us, so I wouldn't want to just give them 4 days notice.
Well, my follow-up question is this. To your knowledge, with the expiration of many of the executive orders associated with the emergency order happening in June, would that mean that any such expenses against CARES related to actions under the emergency order would not be eligible expenses?
2 unrelated. So the gubernatorial order relates to governance within the Commonwealth and certain emergency orders being issued for the Commonwealth.
Yes.
The CARES funding is coming from the federal government.
Yes.
And it is funded through December 31st of 2021, and all of those appropriate uses remain in place.
Okay. They're
So-
unaffected by the emergency order.
Correct.
Thank you. All right. ARPA.
ARPA. So as per last week's discussion with regards to what is this going to look like, how are we going to vision what our future as a community looks like, I know the town administrator has been putting together sort of the backbone or the framework of a steering committee to bring together the appropriate stakeholders. And we've also talked about what the process would be after those priorities were identified and the original wish list or ask was identified, how we would then bring additional expense requests that were outside of that original request. And, I think what we'll probably see would be a similar process to what we had with CARES. With CARES, the board looked at initial requests, and then after that, anything that was outside of those initial requests came to the board for approval through a vetting process, and then they're decided on an individual basis. If the steering committee comes up with a couple big projects or sort of some frameworks of things that we're going to be focused on with some approximate budgets that work within the tranches of money and the timeline of the money being dispersed, after that, when you have the one-off opportunities that come up, there needs to be a way that those requests can be, requested by a board or committee if appropriate, or through a department head, and then it gets to the board, and the board will then decide where we are in the balance sheet and whether or not it fits with the vision of how we think the ARPA fund should be spent. But that's still in the sausage-making phase right now.
And I'll just back up and play some semantics gymnastics with you. As you
Yes.
said, the steering committee, this will have to be a steering group of sorts, as we can fit the finance committee on there in their role, because they can't sit on another committee, so to speak. So it will be a steering group, but I think it was very much in line with where we are with the discussion from last week, that making sure that we're looking big picture ahead of time, seeing, looking from the 21 through 24 time frame, putting a plan in place, and then, as the chief said, putting together a similar flow chart to the one for CARES of how these things will progress before they're finally expended. So,
I think what we talked about was that using the benefit of planning versus CARES. That's the big difference to me. And with the benefit of all these stakeholders and creative thinkers, I think we can achieve what the grant intends to the benefit of our position and our infrastructure. So, and also, as I need to emphasize this, Travis, we need to creatively, constantly look over the fence what other communities and usage of this money may be for best practices, because there'll be a lot of creative actions by other communities, and let's keep an eye on them. Some of them might be very beneficial to what we're trying to do.
And I think that's the benefit of having a blend of both staff as well as elected individuals on the steering group, I believe is what we're going to call this. Because it's a working group around the ARPA, is that through their networks, they'll have
Right.
access to some of that information and best practices from other communities.
I think it's the right way to go, and Holliston will be well served.
Again, as I mentioned last week, and I really was waxing very poetic and philosophically, but this will certainly set the tone of how we as a community recover from the impact of this pandemic, and will lay a very solid foundation for our future for many years to come.
Travis, one quick question. We confirmed that the steering group will be a public body, receiving public input. Posting? Will they be posting?
So the way that I've envisioned it, with a representative from the Select Board, School Committee, Finance Committee, and then the staff members, would not need to be posted. We could certainly go about that. I think from a planning perspective, that might be beneficial. From once we get into sort of any decisions that need to be made for expenditures, I want to make sure that we're remaining as sort of fluid as possible. But from an initial stage of putting meetings together to bring in ideas, as we'll talk about what the steering group intends to do, which is take input from all of the boards and committees in town. I think that in the initial stages, we certainly would want to make that a public process.
Do you agree?
No, absolutely. I think it should be something public. I think people should have the opportunity to not only provide input, but to sort of hear how the sausage gets made, in effect. But I did have one question. With respect to this money, there's also a portion of, there's some money that's being directly given to the schools. Is that correct? Or is this all in for the town?
Independent of ARPA, there is a third round of ESSER, which is coming.
Okay.
Which is independent of the ARPA funding.
Love all these acronyms.
Yeah, I know. So they've already had 2 rounds of ESSER. This will be their 3rd round of ESSER.
Okay.
It's nowhere near the scope or scale of what the town will see in ARPA. It's closer to an earlier phase of the ESSER that they've seen.
Gotcha. So ARPA is going to be a lot of what the schools will be using as well from a funding mechanism for the next few years.
Which is why they would need to be
Absolutely. Okay.
at the table. And this is where, and I know we've talked briefly about the social, emotional, and the behavioral impact of the pandemic.
Indeed, yes.
And the linkage that needs to exist moving forward between the schools, youth and family services, and other non-government agencies to address those needs. But the funding allows those specialized areas of focus.
Okay.
So.
I'll just point out one final thing, because there's been a lot of seminars that the chief and I have been participating in, being put on through the state, the feds. Essentially, the mechanism for ARPA goes under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53A. So it operates mechanically much like CARES. What we're talking about here for the steering group is setting up how the town would like to approach it. So just for clarification.
Okay.
That's it.
Recording in progress.
That's great to hear. Any questions from folks assembled on the Zoom for Chief Cassidy relative to CARES and ARPA programmatic updates? Hearing none, we'll move on to the warrants. Thanks, Chief.
Thank
Thank you, Chief. All right. So I have one warrant. I'll make a motion to approve the warrant in the amount of $1,994,205.46. Of that, $1,259,638.25 is town payroll.
Did you make a motion? I'll second that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries. Thank you, Ben. All right. Public comment. Ben.
All right, I got a couple. So I had a meeting with our DPW director, Sean Reese, today, and he wanted to give me a couple updates. One, he wanted to talk a little bit about well, I'll bring it up here and see if this is something that we need to talk about in board business. But
Sure.
So the first thing we mentioned is that the sidewalk Stantec, the data collector, has completed their acquiring all the data that they need for the sidewalks, and they're going to have a meeting with us, or with probably with Sean and I, in the next couple weeks to just sort of go over what are the findings, what are the next steps, and they're going to be working with merging their information with Complete Streets in that process, because I guess some of the information that's been collected.
part of the scope too, right?
Yeah, it is. So that's all going to be brought together. So my question would be, and this might be something for like next week or something like that, to just sort of ask, what role the board wants to play in that. Do we want to have Stantec come before the board and give a big presentation and sort of talk about all those things? Do we want to have a little bit more of an informal, go through me, what kind of thing? So I wanted to sort of take that temperature to see what we wanted to do and come up with planning. They would probably be finished like late June, so it probably would be looking at like a July timeframe with a presentation, if that was the board's.
So my first blush is yes. I think coming before the board would be a great first step. To some extent, that's a public interface meeting where folks from the general public can see what the concept is going forward.
Sure.
I don't know what to expect from that, Ben, in terms of what they're going to show, and
Yeah.
are they going to cost it out? Are they going to show primary, secondary? I don't know what to think of it, but
Yeah.
when we get there, we figure out what they're showing.
Right.
There may be some period of time where we have to sit back and allow public input to be heard. Some communities, or I should say some neighborhoods, may say, what about us? Did you think of this?
Right.
And that's a state road, or
Right.
something like that. I think Stantec should possibly consider at least one public, maybe two public meetings.
Okay.
Before they deliver a final product to us.
And maybe the answer is too, is we can certainly ask them. I don't remember exactly what's in our contract, like what they can do if they can do on several.
Right.
But maybe
That's a
they come
good point. Yeah.
But maybe there's one that they come to us and present to us, and then there's maybe another one that's public facing, where it's just more like Q&A from the public or something. I don't know, or maybe
And
we can think about that.
in addition, I would think that if I was on the school committee, I'd want to see it.
Sure.
And if I was Dr. Custer, I'd want to make sure that any kind of infrastructure was adhering to the state law to allow for pedestrian access to certain schools and so forth. So there are a couple of layers to it. That's just my first blush out of the gate. I
Yeah.
really am excited to see what they have to say.
Yeah.
But if you want to give them some feedback, I'm thinking yes to us, hopefully some access to the general public.
Yep.
And
Maybe the
definitely
council on
check in with the
aging, and
schools.
maybe some other interested parties. So yeah, I'll check with them, and I think
What do you
I'd
think?
like to see that.
Yeah, I think we
He
definitely
said
want to have
yes.
them
Okay.
present here. I think we put that in the contract. We'll have multiple public meetings, access to them.
I think there were
So,
multiple, but I couldn't remember exactly.
Yeah, generally we put 2 in there
Okay.
as a baseline, so.
Okay. All right. I will, when we have a meeting, I will bring back to the board my how that meeting went and if there's any other questions or things that we need to address. The second piece is Winter Street is about a quarter completed, the water main replacement. About 2,700 feet has been replaced thus far, and they're still expecting to finish up probably around September is about the time frame. Things have gone pretty smoothly so far, knock on wood. But that project is continuing to move forward. The third thing, just to bring up, there was an article in the Boston Globe about PFAS. I know our town
In
administrator
Wayland.
in Wayland was one of the big towns. They were talking about that. So I wanted to. I asked Sean about it. I know, just to sort of get ahead of that. Any line of inquiry around there, and he said they took some samples from all of our wells in April, and all of our wells tested below the threshold for action, so they're
By
low.
they, you mean Mass DEP, who offered to do this for all communities, because
Yes.
PFAS is a growing concern. So
Yes.
they offered it, we accepted it, and they did
And
that.
they've completed it, and we are below the maximum for all sites. They are going to do a second round just to confirm the initial findings, and that should be happening probably next week or the next couple of weeks.
Are those reports on our website?
Not
So I talked to Sean today about waiting until the second round. We'll have the official report from Mass DEP, and then we put that report up.
That was actually my final comment, was we have more public information about what it means, what's going on, what the findings are once we've completed the second round. So that might be like later in June, but I just wanted to sort of mention it because it was an article in the.
For anyone wondering what PFAS is, because I've talked way more about PFAS in my life than I ever wanted to. The other acronym, or the other way that it's described is quote unquote forever chemicals. And it's been in some areas where, especially where there was firefighting foam used at a large scale, so in some of the training facilities, those types of things. But other communities have had them as well. So it's very good that DEP's initial, which they paid for, why we took them up on it, have been positive. And once we get that second round in the report, we'll put that up on the website.
And it should be it's a formality. It should be just confirming what we've already seen.
And Chief, we don't use that kind of fire suppression any longer, correct?
All of the foam in our inventory that had PFAS was removed by a third-party vendor paid by the state. All current firefighting foam is PFAS-free.
Excellent.
Anything else?
My last comment is to make sure that everybody goes out and votes tomorrow. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. at Holliston High School. So if you have not voted already, please do so. All these elections matter. So and that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I do not have any public comments. I don't think Tina does either, so we'll ask the public at this point if they have any public feedback. Hearing none, we will move on from the comments from the town administrator. Mr. Hart.
Okay, just to go off of Mr. Sparrow's last point about voting, the clerk's office will be on site tomorrow, so they will not be in town hall. If you need the clerk's office, you'll need to get them there. Otherwise, you can come through my office for anything that you would normally go through the clerk's office for. With that, I will get into a couple updates. One comes from our sustainability coordinator. In support of our small business community, Eversource's Main Streets Energy Efficiency Program will be taking place the week of June 7th through the 11th. Energy efficiency experts will be in town assessing and, when appropriate, making lighting, refrigeration, HVAC, electronics, and weatherization type upgrades. The program will decrease energy consumption, lower the cost of doing business, and help the town reduce our carbon footprint. So that is a program that Eversource reached out to us about. And the sustainability coordinator was great in working with them to make sure that that goes off. So Eversource's Main Streets Energy Efficiency Program for small businesses in town will be June 7th through the 11th. The second update from him, which will be also piggybacking, or will be piggybacked on next week, is as a result of the successful procurement process involving 9 interested vendors, the Metro West Solar and Clean Heat Challenge is set to begin in early June. This is something the board had taken action on previously and will be coming up next week as well. The program involves Holliston, Ashland, Natick, and Framingham, and will provide our residents and small businesses with solar, air source, heat pump, and ground source heat pump technologies at favorable rates. Letter agreements for the selected vendors are being finalized, and the select board will be asked to sign off one last time next week at that meeting. The other thing I wanted to mention is that later this week, something that we discussed through the budget process for FY22, supported by the Select Board, the Finance Committee, Town Meeting, is the hiring of an Assistant Town Administrator / HR Director. That's a reorganized position from one that existed. It's not a new headcount. That position, I intend to post that position later this week on the MMA website where we post most of our things. I would expect it to get a lot of interest, and I will spread it as wide as possible. And then the intent would be to put together a screening committee, including the school superintendent and other department heads in town, to look at the best candidates, pass them on to myself and most likely the select board chair and maybe one other for a second round, with the intent of hopefully having somebody in here the first week in August is the current timeline. I understand it might be a little aggressive, but I'm hoping to move fast. I think it's very important for the organization. I think it's going to be a great hire. So looking forward to that. Again, this week it would be posted with obviously a number of weeks of timeline of letting applications come in, the interview process, and then ideally somebody that is so beloved in the community or area where we're taking them from that they have to give at least 3 weeks notice before they can come to our town. So excited for that. One other thing I wanted to mention, these are all sort of been timed with the after tomorrow's election. The town clerk and I discussed an email to all boards and committees to touch on a variety of topics. One is the MIIA and MMA, so Maya and the MMA Code of Conduct class that we got a lot of good feedback from boards and committees members who participated in that. They really liked it and they wanted us to send that information out to everybody, so we'll do that. Additionally, the email policy, which we'll talk about later, slight tweak to that, just reauthorizing it and then getting that out. It's been, we've been giving it to sort of new committee members recently, and it's been well received, so we want to make sure we get that out to everybody again, and make sure we follow that process where that eventually goes to the clerk's office for any new boards and committee members come in. They get that when they go through the swearing-in process, getting hit from all angles with that. And then the third thing that'll go out to all boards and committee members after the election is going to be information on a seminar put on by town council. Through our contract with town council, we get at least 2 seminars per year that they'll put on, and it can be for staff or it can be for boards and committees. The intention here would be to have an open meeting law, public record, sort of 101 of how boards and committees work, and then really sort of Q&A, access to town council for all boards and committee members. This is an idea that came to me from a number of people interested in these types of topics. The idea right now would be after Labor Day, where we want to have the most people accessible to it. I know that the summer can get a little crazy for people. So the idea would be after Labor Day. We have a tentative date of September 15th. So that will go out in the email. If there's a lot of people who can't do that date, it would be a Wednesday. We would do it in Upper Town Hall. We can adjust that date, but right now, tentatively, September 15th after Labor Day for a town council seminar available to boards and committees for sort of the 101, but also a Q&A on any of those topics. So that will be trying to time after the election tomorrow. And then one last thing that sort of times with the election is we discussed the Comprehensive Long-Range Plan Committee, which was established at annual town meeting, has 17 seats by design, the way that the article was passed. 14 of those seats are designees of existing boards and committees. So the way that it's been essentially envisioned is that those 14 seats will default to the chair of the boards and committee that designate. Then those boards and committees, as they meet throughout, hopefully early summer, can choose if they'd like to keep their default designee, the chair, or if they'd like to put somebody else as their designee on that committee. The 3 other seats that are not defaulted would be the Finance Committee, who cannot sit on there because of the way the bylaws are written, so they'll have to designate somebody who is not a sitting member of the Finance Committee. Sustainability, who does not currently have a committee that has a quorum, although there was a committee that led to the creation of the sustainability coordinator, so I think that there's going to be an easy fit there, although that just doesn't default at the moment. And then the Department of Public Works, again, I will work with the petitioner, Mary Greendale, to make sure that those seats are arrived at. And so all of that information, I've just been waiting until after the election to send out, because I know there's going to be some reorganizing of these boards and committees after the election.
Right.
So all of that is coming very shortly, and that is all I have for an update.
Questions for the town administrator?
No.
I just have not so much a question as a comment. Please do not lose sight of the fact that I understand the legislature is moving or trying to move quickly in response to the expiration of the executive order. It will have impact on Holliston in a number of different ways, but most importantly, the electronic remote meetings that have been conducted.
It's a great point. That needs to go in that email.
Yeah, I think at some point we have to confront what's likely to happen. If I had to guess, I would say the EO will expire and will be legally forced to revert to pre-COVID arrangements, and then wait to see if the legislature gives us permission and via law or revised law to proceed after that. But clearly something's going to change, so folks need to get ready for that, and they need to be given requisite heads up. Any questions for the town administrator from the Zoom call? Hearing none. FY21 retrospective look and the FY22 outlook. So we placed this on the agenda for a couple of reasons. This is the last meeting of this cycle of the select board, as both Ben and Travis have indicated. Tomorrow's the town election, and there may be changes coming to the board. So we look back at FY21 to some extent and view some of the items that the board has accomplished, and I believe the clerk has some highlights to share. And following that, we will briefly discuss the FY22 outlook and what the future board, when it reforms, will be confronted with looking at. So Ben, if you wouldn't mind, just give us a heads up on what are the things that we looked at from Q2, which is quarter 2, and Q3.
And those are the fiscal year, well, I don't know what you want to call it, but yeah, I guess it's the fiscal year.
That's right.
So that would be starting on October 1st, 2020 through December 31st in Q2. So we had a second town meeting in there. We had some discussions about traffic. We had a few actions with respect to speed limits and 555. We talked to some representatives about traffic of that, and then we had some personnel changes, including a new building inspector, and we've also engaged in some infrastructure activity. Some things were changed. There was a new parking area was added near Blair Square between Church and Central Streets, and the shared space Streets and Spaces grant was for the one-way on Front Street, which has become much more permanent fixture in the town. And the big thing that happened during that period, though, was that town meeting, that special town meeting, or I don't know, I never know what I'm supposed to call it, if it's a special town meeting, an annual town meeting,
Specials in the fall.
fall town meeting.
Now it's all annual, so I think we changed it.
yeah.
It was the last special town meeting.
Well, the hard part was I actually think in the bylaws it actually was called it two different things. So it was hard. That was what's so confusing, is though it actually called it special and then not called it special.
Right.
But in any event, we had, in the midst of a snowstorm, we did have that town meeting, and were able to get a lot of the town's business accomplished. So that way, thereafter, we could set the tax rate and get the tax bills out on time.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think those are probably the main high-level Q2.
Yeah, no doubt that town meeting, which was COVID impacted because it was delayed, was really featured a lot of traffic issues. The study that came out of it is we're awaiting the feedback as we speak to solidify a heavy commercial vehicle exclusion on other streets. As I noted, these we also did the humanitarian awards in there, Ben.
Yes.
Something that started last year. I think it's a worthy exercise for the board to recognize people at a time when we should be giving thanks to the unsung people in our community. And certainly as we ended that quarter, we were going into a very dark period with COVID. It was on everyone's mind as we tried to implore a safe social distancing policy, which I think takes us to Q3.
Sure. So yeah, so Q3 starts in January and goes through March. And the big thing that the select board really worked on was getting ready for town meeting in May. There's a lot of preparation that needs to take place, budget reviews, starting to prepare the warrant. And there's a lot of activity with that. And there were certainly some other board business, in particular with respect to some public forums, such as talking about Marshall Street Solar Project and setting water rates, an annual highlight of the select board's calendar. And also looking at things like Front Street and, again, Hopping Brook, which is always a light topic whenever it comes up. There were several infrastructure projects, again. Our poor town administrator in his first year had to endure drilling on both sides, above him and behind him, as the new doors and the new floors upstairs were being put in. However, we're starting to see the fruits of that. We finally have new doors that look pretty fantastic and open adequately and properly, and the new floors upstairs, it'll be great when the public gets to see it and engage with the space again, because it really looks pretty outstanding. They did an awesome job. Very, very great upgrade. And so in continuing to work on some personnel changes, we hired a new COA director. Lisa Borchetta came on board. We also we also evaluated our town administrator, looked at how he's done in his first few months, and kind of a little very, very early on in his position, but I think we can certainly see already the positive impact he's had on this community and this board. And looking towards the future and trying to get ready for May. I think that was really a lot of what was taking place in the first couple of months of this year. There wasn't a lot of snow, so just trying to hunker down and get things done.
So Ben, I want to thank you for compiling this list. It's something the clerks have done in the last few years. I think you did Q1 earlier.
I did.
So
I did.
If you would be so kind, Mr. Ahern, as to take Q1, 2, and 3 and send it out as a public document so folks can see the progress made by the Select Board this year. Let's pivot, Ben, to FY22 outlook, things that you see on the horizon that the next board's going to have to really focus on.
I think the two main things I would say from where we are right now, we're going to start seeing the results of some of the studies that were approved in both in last December and in May with respect to infrastructure. The sidewalk study, as I had discussed, is coming up. We should be getting some results for the water, the water studies that we have done. We should be getting those later on, probably closer to September, October range. And we're also, looking at a DPW facility, hopefully getting a feasibility study to sort of see what that looks like. And I think probably the other huge piece is the ARPA, is what are we going to do with that, and how is that going to impact the community, and what is the long-range planning for the community with respect to that, in both preparing for potential future COVID challenges, recovering from the previous COVID challenges, and seeing if there's any places in the town that we could take an opportunity to move forward with some potential work, particularly with respect to some of those infrastructure projects. So I'd say those are the two main areas.
Yeah, I would agree. I think ARPA will dominate the discussions. The volume of money and the length of time, I believe, that extends 3 years, will really help reform how Holliston does look on the other side of the pandemic. The hires that Travis mentioned earlier are going to have a big impact on how we govern ourselves. The assistant town administrator, we hope, we plan, will have a positive impact not just on human relations, human resources, I should say, but also on project planning and support for our town administrator. The governance committee will continue its work along with input from the Technical Assistance Bureau from the Department of Revenue, which is expected June or July?
June, I've actually started booking the meetings with those that they'll be setting up meetings to, so school committee, finance committee, select board, all the
Right.
town
So as
staff.
we promised at town meeting, that's continued inward review of how we do our work and how we can do it smarter and better. You touched on it, and I don't want to forget it, and you should probably bring the solar people back soon, Travis, to give us an update. We will hopefully have a Marshall Street solar array constructed next year, and I think we need to get some feedback on the timing of that. I know we were beholden to the utility during the last time, but definitely something we should probably think about bringing back.
They've been on a conservation planning cycle, waiting to get on the agendas there, but peer review has delayed it slightly, so they are certainly progressing.
Let's not forget, Ben, that a year from now, we expect the water treatment plant to be up and running
Yes.
and producing clean water for our long-suffering folks, especially in east to West Holliston.
Yes.
And finally, we'll start to hopefully see the impact of the long-range strategic planning group and the benefits that they can bring to some of the prioritization and long-term improvements for Holliston. So
Absolutely.
looking ahead, FY22 has a lot going on. I look at all of it as exciting and truly investment in our community. So
I think there's one thing that I think we're all going to be looking forward to, and no offense, but no more CARES,
right.
no more
No more
COVID
masks,
updates,
no more-
no
yeah.
more masks,
Say
being able
goodbye.
to just
Maybe we should have a mask burning event as a future event.
do something dramatic.
Can I just add one thing?
Please go right ahead.
Just a conversation with Tina earlier on this. We have about 4 to 6 grants that all time with the June, July timeframe that are, touch on a number of the things that you talked about.
Yep.
Just big picture, we're going into a big grant season.
Yep. There are so many other things, but we thought we'd touch on some big picture issues that are surfacing for Holliston in FY22. The new board, when it's reformed, will state its goals and reform and tackle those agenda items. So the town should look forward to those. Exciting times ahead.
Yes.
Any questions from those on the Zoom about the FY21 retrospective view or the FY22 outlook? Hearing none, let's move on to board business. Ben,
Ooh, busy. Okay.
yeah, we got a few things here.
Yeah, so we have a request for an event permit on Campersall Road
June 5th.
for
Saturday.
June 5th at Campersall Field. So I would like to make a motion to grant the event permit on Campersall Road. It'll be closed between South and Fisher Streets, and for June 5th.
Did you make a motion on that?
I did.
I'll second that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries. Next one.
All right, second one for June 6th. I would like to make a motion to approve an event permit for a neighborhood block party on High Rock Road, and it will mean that that High Rock Road will be closed between the hours of noon and dusk. I made that motion.
Okay, I'll second that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And just for the record, I am in a butter, but I will not be participating that on the block party. My neighbors do a nice job recognizing each other each year. It's a nice community feel thing, but...
Those are great. I like seeing things like that for the
Yep.
community.
Okay, next one.
Okay, so I will make a motion to accept a defibrillator grant. It's given. This grant is given to the Holliston Police Department from the Framingham Union Aid Association in the amount of $1,385, and it will be received to the Police Department gift account.
So it is a single AED, right? Is that
Yes.
a motion?
Yes, I made that motion.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries. And meeting minutes.
Next, I will make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of May 3rd, May 10th, and May 11th, 2021.
All those, I'll second that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries. Next one.
All right, so we have a contract award for drainage roadway improvements in Mudville. So I will make a motion to award the drainage roadway improvement. It'll be, the lowest bid was submitted by RM Pasella of Plainville, Massachusetts for $2,510,999.90. I'll make a motion to award the contract to RM Pasella of Plainville, Massachusetts for the Mudville improvements.
I will second that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries.
Sorry, a little
And as I
too.
indicated, that is well below our maximum budget that had been
Yes.
anticipated, so that was very
I
good.
think we had like what, like it's like 3.3 million or something we have allocated?
Allocated, yep.
Yeah, so we have a good contingency if anything comes up. All right, next one. Pull it here. There it is. Okay, so I will make, the next one is a motion to,
Is a contract with AP Associates
Yeah.
for construction administration and monitoring of the the water treatment plant at well number 5.
okay, so yeah, so I will make a motion for that contract as stated by the town administrator previously in the amount of $598,500, and that's currently within the appropriated funds for
is.
this project.
I will second that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries.
I will make another motion to appoint, we have 3 on-call firefighter and EMTs appointed, and we will appoint Andrew Cook of Holliston, Megan Cusick of Medway, and Christopher Winter of Holliston. So I'll make a motion to appoint these 3 as on-call firefighter and EMTs. And thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you. I will second that motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries. The next item, so we have this is the update on the email communication policy. This topic came up at town meeting through a citizen's petition. Believe you've done some work, excuse me, Mr. Ahern, to refine and update the policy that had been in place. Do you want Ben to
Sure.
read something, or do you want to introduce the issue?
I can bring it up on the screen if we want.
Go for it, man.
And by myself making the changes, I believe it was our IT director, Chris Mayo, incorporating the changes that we discussed last week. So one thing is to change the time that this was originally adopted, which was 2018, it was still the Board of Selectmen. This is now the Select Board. So you see the red line cross out replaced by Select Board. As I said, I believe this policy stands up very well today as well, but one of the things we discussed is having the policy indicate or encourage committee members to engage with town email addresses, and so we did put that here. It's in green in this so that you can see it separated, but obviously the what's in your packet to be signed this evening is just the version to be authorized. Then everything else is as it was, and mentioning the fact that it was originally adopted in June. The version that you'll be signing says the actual date, which I believe was June 25th, and then updated on this day, which is May 24th, 2021. Again, changing select board and the names of the current board. And so updating this would allow me to get this out tomorrow, or actually Wednesday, excuse me, with the town clerk after the election. As I mentioned earlier in the TA update, the intention is to have this in a packet to all boards and committee members. And then the process moving forward, as I said, would be consistent updates so that everybody's aware of it. Any new members who come in after the fact will be reached out to by staff, and as they come to get sworn in, would also be addressed through the town clerk's office to make sure that everybody's aware of the policy, which I think just got a little muddied in 2018, and we're looking to rectify.
Okay. Any questions on the new email, the revised email policy, Mr. Sparrow?
No, I do not have any questions at this time.
Sorry, if I can just add to Mr. Sparrow's point from last week, we also, the intent would be to have some individuals acknowledge receipt, and if you are opting out, to see if we can get individuals to essentially say, yes, I am opting out, just as an added layer.
Got it.
Okay, so they would basically be, like if you you're automatically enrolled, but if you'd have to opt out, you'd have to sort of take an extra step if you want to opt out.
Well, we do need them to ask us for the email because we set it up. So it's really if you're asking for it when we give you the option, that's great. And if you're saying no, we're just acknowledging that you were given the opportunity, essentially.
Okay, got it.
Okay. I will entertain a motion to approve the updated email communications policy, Mr. Sparrow.
So moved.
I will second that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries. Any other business, Ben?
I do not have any other business.
Is there any other business associated with the Zoom call? Hearing none, I will just myself echo. It's been a pleasure serving on this board for the last 3 years. This board will reconstitute a week from today.
It's actually Tuesday because of Memorial Day.
Oh, good, thank you.
June 1st.
Yes.
Thank you. Tuesday, June 1st. In the meantime, I hope folks adhere to Mr. Sparrow's message to get out and vote tomorrow. It's going to be a beautiful day. Other than that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
And actually, I will before I make that motion, just a comment. It's been a pleasure working with you as the chair. I've very much enjoyed sitting here and learning from you. And hopefully someday soon we can actually talk to each other without masks on. And
I know, right? That might be.
that might be coming someday soon, hopefully. So I will make the motion to adjourn.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries. Good night, Holliston. Thank you.